Break the Nielsen.
Hold on.
I didn't say in which way, but whether we'll break them.
Good evening, everyone. The hour being 7 p.m. on Monday, June 21st, 2021. This is the Laconia City Council special budget meeting that we are commencing right now. This meeting is held in person at City Hall. In conformance with New Hampshire RSA 91A, a quorum of the board's members must be physically present in the meeting room for the meeting to start. And I believe that we have a quorum, but we'll formally do it with our roll call. The public can choose to attend and participate in person or by Zoom. The Zoom link is webinar ID 886-0932-1557, password 809588. To listen only to this, you can call using this option only. If you call in and use this option, it allows you to listen to the meeting with no opportunity to participate. Obviously, we're being broadcast on YouTube as well at www.youtube.com/LaconiaNH. If any board member is using Zoom, he must identify his location and who else is in the room with him. If at least one board member is on Zoom, all votes taken will be done by roll call vote. The meeting will continue even if the member's Zoom connection is lost. So before we formally call to order, I'd like to start by saluting the flag. If Councilor Hamel will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our recording secretary this evening is City Clerk Cheryl Hebert, and I'd ask her to please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney. He's not on Zoom, right?
It's not on Zoom.
Not present. Counselor Susie.
Present.
Counselor Littman.
Present.
Counselor Haynes.
Here.
Counselor Hamel.
Present.
Counselor Felch.
Right here.
Mayor Hosmer.
Present. Thank you very much. We are joined this evening by City Manager Scott Myers, as well as Finance Director Glenn Smith as well. Moving right along to item number 6 is under unfinished business, which is 6A, the general budget discussion. We've had all of our presentations right now. The budget has been presented to us. I don't believe that anyone has requested a department head to attend this evening. So I do see Dean. Did someone request Dean, or is he just here because he's making the extra effort? Thanks for joining us, Dean. You're a glutton for punishment, perhaps, huh? But anyway, during this general budget discussion, this is the opportunity to ask questions. If we've all had an opportunity to maybe do a little deeper dive and ask city manager questions, now would be the appropriate time. If councilors have questions about the budget or recommendations or suggestions, now might be the time to bring them up. Councilor Susie.
Is there any update from the state?
So yes, community conferences were held and took votes last week on the 17th, I believe. And there was a budget compromise that was agreed to by the committee conference along on HB1 and then also HB2 trailer bill, which has some budget related items along with some other items in it. And that will be an up or down vote for both the Senate and the House this Thursday. So committee conference is agreed, but now it goes to both full bodies on Thursday.
Okay, so assuming that everything goes as planned, any idea what the impacts might be?
I think the biggest impact as far as revenue goes for the city is that they've added some additional funds to the rooms and meals tax distribution, bringing it up to a 30% level, I believe. And ballpark number, I think that'll increase on page. Let's go to page 57. And it'll be in the second block of numbers, the second line item down, additional rooms meals. So right now we're slated to get approximately $912,000, and that was based on the dollars being distributed at a current percentage, which is about 21% of the dollars that are collected are distributed to municipalities. So by going to 30%, we're a little bit short of a 50% increase. So instead of the 912, we're probably going to be somewhere in the area of an additional $400,000 in that line item. If you drop down in that same column, down about four numbers down to 429,000. That was kind of a generic placeholder that we spoke of, that we put, that we were either looking to see what came out of the budget, whether there'd be any revenue sharing like there was in the prior 2 years' budget. And we got about $394,000 in revenue sharing, both in fiscal year 20 and in fiscal year 21. There's no revenue sharing here. We listed it there because we believe we might have had an opportunity to backfill lost revenue or shortfall revenue due to COVID. And the thinking could be that because the state, because there was COVID, state revenues were down in a number of categories, and therefore this would be an opportunity to backfill. Seeing that we believe we're going to get about an additional 400,000 in rooms and meals, we will probably back that number down to closer to zero, or maybe even zero it out. So we think the net of one would take up most, if not all, of that 429, which we had in there as a placeholder. And again, that's why we were waiting to see what came out of U.S. Treasury on the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. We're waiting to see what's coming out of the state budget, and then we'll realign which pocket of money it's coming from.
So no net for the other, basically.
I think we'll net out even.
It's-
And without using, more than likely, without having to use any of the American Rescue Act or plan funds for backfilling that particular revenue. There may be other revenues that we monitor. Ambulance revenue, we know that we were down as soon as the pandemic hit. We've tracked it for a year or so before that, and we tracked it through COVID. We feel that we're down, is it 10 trips a month, or a little more than 10 trips a month? Okay, somewhere north of 10 trips a month at an average billing of $450 or $500. I think we've estimated that we're probably somewhere over $100,000 down in revenue, both for fiscal year 20 as COVID hit, and then also for the early part of fiscal year 21. So that may be something that we backfill a revenue. It won't have anything to do with the budget you adopt, because that's in a special revenue account, and that's making up for revenue that we did not receive both this year and last year. So it's nothing forward looking, but that might be an example of a recommendation we bring to the council on using some of those funds that came out of the American Rescue Fund plan.
So over the last few weeks, as we've done the budget reviews, you might say, the numbers that you have, page II, pretty much is spot on what you think we're going to have.
Yes, everything stays strong. We've seen boat registrations, as the last report I gave you is strong. Motor vehicles continues to surprise. For this year, we're gonna exceed this year's projections probably by 7 or 8% is my guess at this point, as we've got a couple of weeks left to go, which to me is surprising, because as you go by the car dealerships, there's not a whole lot of inventory out there. And the only way you increase your motor vehicle registration is by either more vehicles getting registered, or somebody registering a newer or more expensive vehicle than they currently registered. And that's where the value comes, because, if you register a new car today, every year for the next 5 years, the amount you pay decreases. So where they're finding cars, I don't know, but the numbers are staying very strong on that. So I think everything else we've expected, and we've already made a reduction in the highway block grants, which is another way of saying the gas tax. And that's it kind of speaks for itself, as over this past year, there were far fewer gallons of gasoline sold as things were shut down, or people worked from home, or schools weren't open, and all of that. So, and that's a direct distribution that goes 12% of the gas tax collected in the state is distributed to municipalities. And that number is trued up every year to the prior year's number.
So even with finishing up 21, okay, with some, let's say, rollover or leftover, there's nothing more to add to 22 or help with 22 to reduce it more or add to it.
I think where we've asked you in the budget item last week was on the carry forward. So there certainly are a number of capital projects, large and small, that haven't been completed yet. And some of it's just due to the timing of the project that we are looking to carry forward. And then if you go to page, it's way in the beginning of the budget book. Let's go to page 4. The third line down where it says less the use of surplus. So we are using $700,000 out of our undesignated fund balance this year to just reduce property taxes. And that's something that last year you can see we used $720,000, and we've been slowly weaning ourselves from that every year. I think when I started here in 2011, it was over $1.1 million. So we've made little but consistent steps to start doing so. If you think about it in the way that we're taking $700,000 out of the savings account, it's nice to be able to replenish that $700,000 either by having your revenues come in higher than you budgeted for, or having some funds not spent that you had budgeted, and those lapses or additional revenues will flow right into fund balance. So I think trying to have, at least $700,000 returned, and we've probably been able to do anywhere between $500,000 and $900,000 a year on average for the last 5 years anyway. So we've always at least replenished or come very close to replenishing the fund balance that we use every year. And that's important for a couple of reasons. It's good to have a minimum of 6% sitting there for unexpected emergencies or rainy day. Even the state has a rainy day fund. And the other reason that we want to kind of build that up a little bit is when the city purchased the Colonial Theater back in 2015 or 16 or whenever it was, we took $1.2 million in cash, I believe, out of the fund balance at that point. So that brought it from an area where it was running at around 7 or a little over 7%. That brought it down into the 5% range. So to kind of get that, not to become a huge number, but to get it in that 6 to 7% range again, is really kind of the minimum threshold when you look at, sound financial practices through the GOFA and other organizations. So our goal, and I think this year we've certainly underspent some funds just because we haven't had certain programming. Certain staff have, chosen to furlough or take time off, and just because of COVID, a number of things didn't happen. So I think, by default, we are going to have some funds lapse, and then again, we're seeing the revenues, I believe, overall will be coming in stronger than we budgeted.
So that $700,000 here is not from the funds lapse. This is just normal what you put aside for a rainy day fund.
That came out of the rainy day fund. So we said we're going to use $700,000 out of the rainy day fund this year, and therefore reduce property taxes for the residents by using some of our savings.
Okay.
So we'd like to have at the end of this fiscal year, ending on June 30th, the hope would be that at least $700,000 will lapse to go back and replenish, because next year we'll want to do the same thing.
Okay.
What's our percentage? You were talking about around 6 or 7%. What's our percentage on that?
I think that number is a little tricky at the moment because it's tied to the ISF issue. So some of those funds that were in undesignated are now siloed, as in is owed. So I think once we complete that transaction, it's probably going to get us somewhere back around the 6% level. Off the top of my head, I could be off by 1%, but in that 6% range, I think is where we'll be.
Great. Councilor Lippman.
I think the other thing to keep in mind about the fund balance is we've designated fund balance like a number of years back. We didn't have any non-capital reserve fund. We've got several $100,000, close to that in that now, right? We have a reserve fund for health insurance of $171,000, which we've not had to touch. We have winter maintenance fund. We have time off, the payouts of time off we have. So, if you go back and try to do comparisons, you have to also keep in mind looking at those ones that we've designated for specific purposes in terms of the adequacy of our reserves.
That's a great point. So we've tried to take some of the things that we can't control, like winter weather. You could have a mild winter, you could have a harsh winter. So in years that we had a mild winter, I think we started this 7 or 8 years ago, we said, all right, rather than letting that lapse, let's, keep budgeting consistently, but let's park that into a reserve so that in a year that we
Mhm.
have a harsh winter, we're not taking it out of the paving budget because we all know we need paving. And the same thing on the health insurance. We had some refunds and some credits. So that's there. So if there happens to be a year that we get a 12% increase in health insurance rates, we maybe can pull something out of the reserve to soften that and bring it down to a level where the increase in health insurance rates in the budget doesn't eat up everything else, so to speak. So, Council Lippman is correct that in addition to the fund balance, we've created some reserve accounts, and again, have fed them just a little bit at a time, but try to use one-time revenues to build up savings or build up reserves or to do one-time projects over the years.
That's great. That was nice, Henry. Thanks for that. Thank you, Scott. Counselor Felch.
So my understanding is that they're trying to put the school voucher program in the HP2. If that passes, how's that going to affect us?
I'd have to look into that a little bit deeper because I think the choice voucher would be for anybody choosing to homeschool or go to private school of any kind, and it would potentially be money that is not going to the school district for adequacy based on the student population in public schools. I haven't seen the exact numbers how it hits, but I know that the School Boards Association and their lobbying groups had concerns over that initially, that if, pick a number, 5% of your students, were not enrolled in public schools, does that mean 5% of a community's adequacy goes away? I believe they put some safety nets or some stepping stones in there so that it might be a phased in approach and maybe wouldn't necessarily hit all in year one. I think, and again, without following the school issues in that level of detail, I can certainly get it for you. I don't think it's going to be an impact for this year, but it could be something going forward that we would have to monitor. But I would think that it would probably hit, all communities proportionally, to some degree. I would think there's a certain, percent across any community really that might be going to a school other than the public school.
Go right ahead.
Scott, we talked about it when the Parks and Recreation gave their budget. And I just wanted to get from you a feeling of how we are staffed.
Staffing is a challenge. I mean, we've got the dollars in there. It's just finding everything from lifeguards to beach attendants to seasonal maintenance help is just a challenge. And we bumped up our rates of pay. I think a couple of years ago we were in the $10 or $11 range, and this year we're advertising at a minimum of 13 to start. And if somebody comes in and impresses us, there's waiver requests to me to start somebody at a higher grade. I think right now it's just you look at the help wanted ads, everybody is in the boat of finding that seasonal help right now. So it's not for lack of trying, but we are not fully staffed. We have gotten a quote. We actually got it last November from Joyce Janitorial to handle the cleaning and maintenance of our bathhouses and some of the bathrooms in the parks, so that we can free up staff. And I guess if we're hiring staff and we say your job is raking or mowing or working in gardens and irrigation, or your job is cleaning bathrooms, I think more would lean towards wanting to do the non-bathroom use. So starting, I want to say it's this week through motorcycle right after motorcycle week. So I think it's this week. The beach is officially open, even though we've had the bathrooms open. We've got Joyce coming in on a schedule to handle Weirs. And I may be wrong on one of these, so don't hold me exactly, but it's definitely Weirs Beach, Bond Beach, Bartlett Beach, Opeechee, doing Robbie Mills Fields on nights that there's Muskrats games, and then I think maybe something over at Memorial Park. So at least a half dozen of our larger time-consuming are contracted out, and basically we're using money from the temporary salary line item where we haven't been able to hire people, and now just kind of internally shifting it over to contracted services within that line item. So if that's something that we go forward with in future years, we'll just make that adjustment just for a little more transparency to say, this is a contracted service and take it out of temporary salaries. But that's at least one thing that we've done to let our staff focus more on the fields, the parks, and the gardens.
Well, that was my feeling. And, we had a discussion about that. That may be That may be an answer. Maybe then it's not the answer we want, but start to outsource some of this stuff.
It is, and I think if you go to the Parks and Recreation budget on, what's it? 118. Hear little voices in my head. No, it's recreation. I go, it's called Parks, but it's under R for recreation. So 118. As I said to you, for this spring to get some of the fields a boost and getting the initial treatments for weed and fertilizing and stuff, we used some unspent dollars that were in the temporary budget for this year that we're wrapping up. And then you can go down and you can see halfway down the second block of numbers, maintenance grounds, we've bumped that up from 77,000 to 117,000. So we know we've got some talented people on staff who've gone to school and gone to additional classes for fertilization and organic treatments and knowing how to treat in and around water bodies, which is important for us. So that'll be one of those things that either we'll buy the materials and staff time allowed will look to do that. And if we can't handle all of our workload without staff, then we certainly can contract that out and bring somebody in to do mowing or aeration or overseeding or fertilization or whatever the need might be. So we're building in some flexibility. And my hope is next year that we build a little bit more into that grounds maintenance to do it. So again, it's one of those incremental things that we used a little bit of found money this spring. We've got 40,000 additional in the budget for that reason next year, and we'll continue to try to bump that up as funds allow going forward to get that to a better spot.
That's great. If you feel comfortable with it, I'm fine.
So we got that flexibility. It can be staff and materials, or we can contract for it if we need to.
Great. Thank you, Mayor.
Counselor Hamel.
Thank you. Staying with Parks and Rec, Scott, what I'd like to see at some point in the near future is to hire another full-time person in there. There's four guys that handle roughly, not counting, you got the secretaries and the.
And gals,
director and all
don't
that.
short the gals in there.
Yeah, I'm not, but I'm saying.
No,
the
I'm
ones
saying,
that
but
are
they're
out.
not just guys you see out there working, for staff.
So, they handle roughly 26 acres of property,
Mhm.
plus all the buildings in the city. They do maintenance in those buildings also. I think they're pretty understaffed for what we are asking them to do. And I'd like to see us work on adding another one. Maybe we can do like we've done to the police officers, do a half a year in one budget and pick them up in the next budget type thing.
Yeah.
But I think they really could use another person there. And, like I said, we asked them to do a lot.
I don't disagree. You can see the in the positions listed on page 119, the little asterisk there. One of them was actually a vacant position when we were putting this document together and getting it to you in March. So it's we certainly can put more funds there. We're still trying to fill one position that already exists before creating a new one. But certainly, if it makes sense to get a new full time and eliminate money for a temporary seasonal, and we're open to any and all of those types of things. If we're getting a quality candidate, let's just say we are finding a way to make it work. We are not turning away quality people in this labor environment.
And also, I was glad I talked with Amy, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and they do finally have the automatic irrigation system working. They had to work with some problems with the cell towers and that kind of thing, but.
Yeah,
uh,
it actually
that
had
is
to
working now.
upgrade the sensors to a 4G or 5G because they weren't going to support the
3G,
the 3G anymore type of thing. So we had to change nodes on all of the irrigation to be able to communicate. And then the new mowing and trimming equipment that the council authorized back in March or April in hopes of getting it and using it for the season is in, and we are using it now as well. So that's here and being put to good use.
Is there any, I'm sorry,
Thanks, Scott.
is there any equipment, particularly like cleaning the beaches and stuff like that, that would be able to be added to help extend the people we have?
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at that as well. I know the question came up on the infields and kind of, aerating or loosening weeds and stuff in the infield. So we can certainly look to see if there are attachments that can go onto any of our existing equipment that would brush or sweep or that type of stuff to it. So.
I know that when she was here,
Use your microphone.
when Amy was here, one of the questions was security cameras. Okay, I didn't know if there was something that you were thinking about. I don't know where she wanted them, but I think it was somewhere around the parks area, some of the bathhouses and stuff like that. Am I right, Tony?
Yeah,
She was-
because the bathhouses are getting graffiti and damage, and I know Bartlett Beach is having problems with shutting lights off and disconnecting the buoys and all kinds of stuff like that.
So we are slowly adding them around the city. We do have several that belong to the police department that can be located in any location and tracked wirelessly and that type of stuff. But we are adding them to physical locations. I don't want to start tipping our hand as publicly as to where we are doing it, but it's something we are continuing. I will tell you, we don't have them everywhere at this point, but if we do have hotspots, there are several that the police department can and locate for us relatively easily.
Okay, and one last thing on that. They did a fantastic job this year, Parks and Recs on Halloween. Okay, I thought it was just awesome by everybody. Is there money put aside for that, or should we add money for that, or how is that? It wasn't in their budget as a line item.
It's in
Okay.
the programming.
It was in the programming, but I think last year they just had a lot of staff ingenuity and they got families to volunteer who maybe didn't want to do trick or treating at their house, bought the candy and came down and did it. And, you know, I want to say I was a little bit skeptical and thinking, oh, okay, who's going to go and walk around the track or
It was
whatever and
awesome.
trick or treat? And it was fantastic. It was one of those things that it just, you know, to be honest with you, I looked at it and went, all right, let's give it a try. And I'm thinking, and then they had hundreds of people. So they definitely want to carry it forward and do it again. So, so definitely within the programming, we can find ways to make that happen. But they did have a great group of volunteers and sponsors last year to help put that on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Counselor.
One more, Scott, question on Parks. Do they still have that piece of equipment that cleans the beaches, that picks up the sand and gets the stuff out of it?
I don't know.
Still using that?
I
I
don't
know
know.
they had one at one time.
I can check on that, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Some type of rake, I think, went behind the tractor.
No, they had a machine that would,
Actual machine,
yeah. it wasn't all that long ago, seems like.
No,
but Time goes
no.
by pretty quick.
I'll check on that for you.
Talking about equipment, okay. Was there something about Parks and Recs where they wanted one of the boom trucks or something like that? Or they got to borrow one from Public Works or somebody, whenever need one? I mean,
What they used it for.
well, they do a lot of maintenance of all our buildings, and there was, I thought that was something that was brought up. It's just, when you mentioned that, it's just something that,
Wasn't in the capital reserve.
I think it was in the CIP that they were requesting it, and I think it's in an out year. I don't think it was for this year particularly.
Right.
We do have one lift truck that DPW uses, quite a bit to, handle with maintenance and issues, and the number of flags up and down this past 12 months has been phenomenal. And then in off hours, the fire department actually uses it because they're replacing and updating some of the fire alarm wire. So they need to work around the 7:30 to 3:30 type of schedule. So at some point, does it make sense to have a second, lift truck in the city? Probably it's something that is in demand, and it's just, where does that rise from a want to a need type of thing, and balancing the other needs of the budget.
Yeah, what
I
department
think it
pays
was
for
to
it.
cut trees or something on Parks property. I think that's
Yep.
what they said.
Any other questions or any other feedback for city manager?
See, I could have had Amy here and she would have known all the answers to your questions.
Watching.
Interesting.
Sure.
Is she on Zoom?
No,
If she's smart,
No,
she's
she's
not.
actually, she's in the middle of her meeting right now.
All right.
That's right too. She's gonna be.
They did hire 3 lifeguards too for Bond Beach.
Yeah, so we are going to be staffing Bond. There just wasn't enough in the rotation to cover Weirs Beach completely. You can't do it with
Right.
3 with breaks and whatever. So we prioritized them. We do have them, and we will have them up on Beach this year. And last year when COVID hit, we were actually working with the local gym over on North Main Street and bringing in a trainer to train people and get their certification. And I think we were even reimbursing the cost for them if they showed up for work. We were going to give them, the dollars back. And just with COVID last year, we couldn't. So I can tell you, in this labor environment, every department is being very creative right now on what we're trying to do, because you just see every reader board sign and look at the newspaper, and we're up against everybody.
Bond Beach open today.
well, I called Parks and Recs this morning, Tony Triz. no swimming lessons this year because they can't find anybody to do it.
Have the staff.
It's disappointing to my
You know,
5-year-old.
what's disappointing is even when they did, the lifeguards wouldn't do it. They didn't want to do it. Why, I don't know.
Well, some lifeguards aren't necessarily trained as swim instructors. It's two different skill sets.
Okay. Counselor Lippman.
So see Dean here. One of our common concerns are dealing with property issues that are not being kept up. Do we have that adequately addressed in this budget?
So we about a year ago, we went from a part-time position to a full-time position, maybe a little bit more than a year ago now.
Yeah.
Okay. Within this budget, though, also was an extra vehicle for land use, because now in addition to doing the building inspection and trying to do drive around for zoning and fractions and stuff, we've got the short-term rental program in place right now. So an extra vehicle is certainly going to provide more opportunity for our staff to be out and about, being proactive as opposed to always trying to be reactive, which just based on some people. And then with the staffing change last year, a longtime employee left during COVID because of a family situation and health-wise, and then did not come back to work and retired. So we did train an excellent person, very, very sharp candidate who was a little bit green, but we knew her and we knew her work ethic, and we felt it was better to bring her along. So part of the inspection office has also been hanging a little closer to the counter in the office this year, partly because of COVID, but partly because helping to train a new person who's now doing great and is well versed in the language and the lingo in that office now. So I think combination of all of that happening in another vehicle would be in the mix will definitely make us more responsive in the field.
Good. Counselor Hamel.
Dean, when we were doing the Zoom meetings and that day, we brought up about the Airbnbs, and do you know how many are actually registered in the city? Since you came to the meeting.
Didn't want you to feel
That would have been a great question to know ahead of time. How many do we have?
I don't know the exact number, but it's
Oh, it's-
around 80 that we have issued permits for.
Okay.
We have processed approximately 20 other applications that were denied for various reasons. Some of them went to zoning board for either special exception or other reasons that they could, and they weren't granted. So it wasn't just a matter of we're denying, but it was a combination of reasons that they did not get approved. So altogether, we've had contact from about 100 property owners. My suspicion is there's at least another 100 out there,
Probably closer to
and maybe more. And I know, Mr. Mayor, you asked to get a price on
Yeah.
some type of a program that would help us in compliance. We had started that discussion with a couple of companies about a year ago, and then when COVID hit, nobody knew what was going to happen with lodging and all that stuff. So we just kind of, we dropped it at the time. So we have just reinitiated those discussions with the two primary companies that we were talking with. We had gotten prices from them about a year ago. We haven't got to the point yet. They have their little sales process that they go through before they will give you a price. So we haven't got to the point yet where they're giving us a price, but it's around 20,000 plus or minus
Per year.
per year. Yeah.
What do they do for that?
Well, if you want me to, I can give you the 30-second elevator speech, I guess. They scour the various websites looking for short-term rental listings. They go on to Airbnb and VRBO, and there's hundreds of sites, but they scour all of them. Those sites don't give you an address, but what they do is they have other ways of doing metadata analysis. One of the techniques they use is if someone has listed a property for sale in the past several years, there's pictures online, and they just match the pictures of a real estate listing up with the picture. This is the same living room, or this is the same front entrance, or whatever. So they're doing a number of different things, but that's one of their prime ways of matching up and getting actual addresses. And then they will, depending upon how level of service that you sign up with them, they will send out letters to property owners saying you need to get a permit. They will send up follow-up violations. Depends on how we want to do it. But the primary function I think that we need, obviously, is identifying who's doing it. And then if we get to a point where we're dealing with 100 or more additional property owners, we may need them to help us with in terms of managing that licensing or whatever, just to kind of keep things keep track of it.
And our penalties are pretty stiff, aren't they?
Technically, they could be $275 a day.
Yeah.
Each day could be a separate violation. We have to go to court to levy those fines. One of the issues, as we all know, in the past year or so has been access to the courts has been very limited. They are in the process of opening up again, so that would help a little bit. But in theory, it could mount up very quickly. But
Sure.
in the reality is whether the fine would actually get imposed or get imposed to the full extent remains, within the court's purview.
Sure. Counselor Susie.
Dean, do we charge a fee for the permits?
We do $250. It's a two-year permit.
2 years?
2 years. Yep.
And when that happens, is that property changed from a residential to a commercial?
No, it does not change its status. There are set criteria that we have for the permit, and there's different zones that allow it and some zones that don't. But I mean, if you have a cottage up on Weirs Boulevard somewhere, we may consider it seasonal, but it's residential, and it really doesn't change that.
Okay, so it's $125 a year, basically, is
Right.
what it comes right down to. And I guess I have to ask the city manager. It sounds like if they're in violation, our enforcement is pretty weak. It's not because that's not what we want, but it's just the laws are not behind it to really enforce it strongly.
No, I think the laws are there. It's a new wrinkle and a new problem that will be winding its way to the courts eventually. But certainly, we do have 2 identified zones. We feel our ordinance is sound. No one has challenged the ordinance that I'm aware of. I know Conway or North Conway, one or the other, had something on at town meeting about doing this, and they're probably as far along, or not quite as far along as we are in adopting something, but they're probably next in the queue of doing something there. So I think no one's challenged the ordinance. So I think it would just be a matter of going through the process of, is it a first violation, second violation, and then it's court, and then you've got a document, and someone's going to say, no, that was my sister from Hoboken and her family here, whatever, and I wasn't renting it. So that's where I think a company like this can come into play, especially if they identify some more properties that now come in and pay that, biannual fee of $250, for the 2 years, or $125 a year. If you get another 100 properties to come in and conform, you've paid for part of that service, along with, the equitableness of this, of some people come in and do it right, and others are, skirting the system, so to speak. So that's a component of it as well. I mean, we do go out with one of our building inspectors and someone from the fire department on every inspection.
We do an inspection for each
Go,
permit
and
application.
It's simple things. It's means of egress. It's square footage of the property that we determine how many people can sleep over in the house. It's checking to see how many parking spaces you have in the driveway so that your parking is contained there. You're not spilling into the street. If you're using the basement, does it have the appropriate you're throwing futons or air mattresses. Do you have the appropriate types of windows or means of egress that you can use the basement safely? It's a CO2 detector and a fire extinguisher, and it's a basic run through. But we do have 2 staff who go over and document all those things before a permit is issued. And then probably one of the other important things is if it's a homeowner who doesn't live there, we have a name of a person who's responsible for that property. So if the call comes in at, midnight for a noise complaint, someone's got a number that can also be calling the property owner, as opposed to it's an absentee landlord type of thing.
Okay, I just think the fee's kind of low. Okay, and
We kicked around different numbers and I hear you.
assuming I can understand what they probably charge of that, I think the $125 fee is pretty cheap. Have we had anybody yet that you've had to go through and violated, had to issue it's a fine or something else like that?
We have not at this point in time. I think the application process is an eye opener to the property owner, and we in black and white, we explain what our expectations are and what they're responsible for, and I think that has been a good thing from the standpoint of they know these are the things that they've got to do. On the 75 to 80 that we've actually issued a permit to, we have not received any complaints except for possibly this week. We got one this morning for something that happened over the weekend that we need to investigate to validate. But I think that's the first actual complaint on a property that has a permit.
Thank you. Councilor Hamel first, and then Councilor Whitman.
About how long now have we been doing this? I'm trying to remember. Is it like 2 years?
For the short-term rentals, about a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. So since the ordinance is fairly new, and I know we kicked the tires on this thing to death when we were trying to go
Right.
through everything and try and capture what we need to make it work. Is there anything that you can see within that ordinance that we could improve on, change to make it easier, or anything?
Yes. We have a couple of words that we chose in a couple of different places in the ordinance that are a little ambiguous, that we've had people challenge us on. So we need to amend and clean up that language so that it is clear. We use the word reside. We have the requirement that if you're going to do a short-term rental as an owner-occupied residence, that you have to reside in the property for a minimum of 150 days a year. The idea being someone who lives in a traditional seasonal area, maybe they go south for the winter, they could still do it if they wanted to. We've had people come in with their little calendar and they're here every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and they add it all up and they got 150 days. And it's like, but you don't reside there. Oh no, we're there 100 years, but their tax card goes to, someplace in Massachusetts. They registered their car there. That's where they're registered to vote. And it's like, we tell them, we can go online and find all this stuff on you. It's not like this is a secret here. We can look you up in North Adams, Mass. and say, are you on the registered voter list? Yes, you are. We can find out where your car is registered. That's not hard to do at all.
Sure.
And then they realize, okay, yeah, I don't really reside there. It's like, no, you don't. So it's those kinds of things. So we need to just come up with a different word that is more or less ambiguous. The provision that was put in for the special exception in terms of a greater community benefit than financial has not worked at all. So I think we need to take a look at that.
Could you come back to us with some better wording then on those things? So that we could
Absolutely
start
can.
the,
Yeah,
process of changing it?
when you got done with your budget process, I was going to approach
Okay.
government and ordinance committee and
Probably the
do a
sooner we
starting
get to
point
that, the
type thing.
better,
Right,
Getting-
right.
Obviously, we're into the season now, so.
Yeah. It's year round, it is the kind of thing now that, yes, it's used heavily for vacations, but it is also used by business travelers who just don't want to stay in a motel or a hotel for various reasons. And business travel is now starting to, uptick again. Obviously the past year or so, business travel was pretty limited, but we have the situation where contractors, like for instance, some of the contractors for Comcast that have been in town stringing wires and have been staying in short-term rentals in a few places in the community. So it's not just vacation. So it is a year-round thing. We do get the uptick obviously in the December through February for skiing, and then say May through October for summer stuff. But yeah,
Okay. So if you could do that whenever
we
you.
can. Yep,
chance.
absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Council Lippman.
Dean, I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask a question of the manager and finance director. In terms of giving you adequate funding for IT and some contingency there, do you feel comfortable with what you have available?
I'll defer to you, Glenn, if you want to grab a microphone.
Thank you, Council Lippman, for the question. I think for 2022, going into this coming year, we have an adequate amount. And I'll say that the part of what's in the budget is an in-depth review of our IT function and our IT security. So I expect coming out of that study, we might have additional recommendations for future years. But I think for what we have now, we're set to go for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, what's the next thing we're going to do? Do we, you're looking at me like we're going to adjourn. So
I've already lost the under over here, so we. So what we have coming before you, just from some housekeeping things, is once we see what happens with the budget and hopefully getting indication that the governor's going to sign it or he signs it very quickly, we'll modify the finance revenue page to reflect what we now know versus what we were kind of estimating back in March and April when we put this together. You've seen the amended grants list that Glenn went over during his finance presentation of a few additional grants that we've identified that we have a good possibility in some case or a hope in other cases of getting that weren't included in the original one. So we will amend that. If there are no other changes of I want to move 20,000 from A to B or vice versa, we would just kind of put that into something simple that when we go to adopt the budget, you could make a motion to substitute that in the whole, and that would get those kind of technical changes all moved in one vote. And then you would still have the opportunity to amend the budget from moving 20 grand from A to B or vice versa, whatever, at any point during that process as well. So I'm probably not thinking that we'll have a signed budget in time for next week's meeting. So I guess my expectation would be that we would not be adopting a budget on the 28th. Just because our agenda goes, to publish on Wednesday afternoon, and the House and the Senate aren't going to vote till Thursday. So at the earliest would be one of the July dates. By charter, the council has until the 4th, as late as the 4th Monday in July, to approve a budget. And if not, the manager's budget would go into effect by default. And all that really means is that gets us a budget. The council could still come back and amend that budget with a 2/3 majority at any time later on. So, but again, not hearing, it's tax cap compliant. We've tried to address the priorities and the needs of the city. Not hearing, a lot of rearranging of the deck chairs, if you will, requests from the council. So that would be our intent to bring that to you. And then probably, again, not for the meeting on the 28th, but one of the meetings in July.
Has the opportunity for the public to weigh in on this at a city council meeting passed?
The official public hearing for it we held last week. There were no speakers, although we did have one Zoom person who self-acknowledged that he didn't know how to raise his hand, and he made a comment about the police budget later in the meeting. But residents could always comment at any time where appropriate, whether it's on the agenda or not on the agenda at any of the other meetings. So not a formal public hearing, which we've already held, but certainly people could comment on it going forward.
And if someone wanted a copy of this budget to review, where could they find one?
We have a copy available in the clerk's office. We have a printed copy also at the library, I believe. And it's online under the Finance Department Budget tab.
Okay. So if someone wanted to go to the library, come to the clerk's office, or go online, they'd have ample opportunity between now and the end of July to take a look at the budget, ask questions at the appropriate time at the next city council meeting or the ones leading up to it.
Yes,
Certainly.
and all of those locations have been available since you all received your budget books in April. So they've been there and available.
Okay, thanks very much. Were you looking to raise your hand?
And one more question before we adjourn here. In terms of some of the work that we've had to do, like particularly around downtown, in terms of digging up the streets and things like that, and, you know, things are sort of coming together. So as a finished product, do we have any money in paving to sort of lay a coat down so it looks perfect, if you will?
The short answer would be yes. The longer answer is we need to do some work on drainage and whatever. And that's kind of the chicken and the egg. Do we pretty it up for a year or two and then we're going to come in and we really need to be doing some drainage improvements in the downtown. As much as I'd like to throw a shim on to buy us 5 years. So could we do it? Yes. Is it good money to spend right now? No.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Hamel.
I brought this up to Scott already, but I think, and it's, I'm not blaming anybody, but I think our American flag display downtown is pretty poor, in my opinion. There's all different kinds of, all different sizes of flags. A lot of the Pleasant Street doesn't even have one. Church Street doesn't have any, and there's holders for them. The intersections don't have any. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think probably to make it work, I think maybe the city needs to take that over and purchase the flags and we put them up.
Put 'em up,
I'm
put 'em
glad
up
to help.
Parks and Rec.
When we get the extra bucket truck, we get, no, I'm kidding you. We certainly,
use a ladder.
we certainly can. And, you know, Celebrate Laconia has done a great job.
They
And
have.
this is something that they've taken over from another group. And, you know, they've worked in the past on the 125th and the light up, you know, downtown and the light up house. And again, it's, we don't want to wear out one group of volunteers. I understand what you're saying. We have run some notices in the Laconia links that if people want to donate to flowers and flags for the downtown area and help replace whiskey barrel planters that rot out after X number of years. I mean, that is all volunteer down to the wagon with the water in it that they take turns going around and watering. Because again, it's just a staff issue of, do we have the time to get a staff to come down and water planters all over the downtown? I mean, it would take a staff person, you know, probably half a day, 3 days a week, you know, and hitting on Friday and Monday. So you make it through the weekend type of thing. So those are the things that, you know, we're challenged with staff for the reasons I already mentioned. But
The other thing is those big planters that are down on the bridge. I don't know if they're clay pots or whatever they are, but the bottoms of them are all white now. I don't know if that's from the salt or
I think it
weather
probably is from
beating
the
or
salt,
whatever.
yeah.
I don't know if those can be painted or just saying.
Councilor Hamel, would you be so kind? I know you are the person about the city. You see these things. Would you be so kind as to put a list together of things that you're spotting?
Oh, God.
Particularly, well, it doesn't have to be a comprehensive, but I mean, these items here, I do tend to agree with you. I think we have to beautify the city so it reflects what's going on in the city.
You know,
There's
I-
a lot of good stuff going
Yes,
on. So
absolutely.
some of this stuff, and I realize what we're up against, there's just not enough employees out there for whatever reason. But I think we should make an effort, particularly, you know, when August comes along and the Iron Man finishes right in downtown on Main Street and we get more activity at the Colonial Theater. You know, we should figure out how we're going to beautify that bridge area and the Main Street area.
I agree. I mean, you know, just
I'd like to participate in that, and I'm
Great.
sure you would as well, but just figure out what we need. You put the list of things, the places that need this. We can look at the budget, what it would cost for us to do this, then figure out a way how we can pay for it and how we can get it done.
No, I agree. I mean, it's great momentum downtown. I mean, just the Bob Marley concerts, there could be almost 5,000 people in the weekend downtown.
Yeah.
And now is your time. So I mean, if we need to find some money to do a whatever, the flip side, and I'll just tell you from where I am, and I'm not picking on anybody or any project, but it's, okay, now we need new planters. Okay, we're just find some money in the budget, Scott, or we need flags, or in some cases, it's we need double-headed ornamental streetlights in front of the Colonial Theater that were in nobody's budget, and those are not necessarily inexpensive. Buying 20 flags is a lot less money than, okay, let's go find, so it's things like that come up during the year. So when we came up with, I can hear Councilor Mound sitting there saying the downtown looked like the Grinch or the Scrooge one year, and go find $3,000 and, we need some lights. So, okay. There's 3,000 here and 10,000 here and whatever, and it adds up. So if we need to do something, we're working on the budget right now. So let's identify what.
Would you find, or somebody find out? I'm not asking for money. I'm asking.
Not yet.
But those lamp poles, double-headed lamp poles look beautiful.
They do.
Okay.
They do. They don't grow on trees though.
But
What
could
is
we
that
find
used
out the price
To pay
of
for
the
theater.
3x5 flag with the aluminum colored pole? I think we might have one or two.
Not capital
out
reserve.
there, but If we could get a
Okay.
price,
Well-
get an idea.
I got a question.
I'll be glad to walk around and count what we need.
There's $1 million plus in the TIF fund. What is that used for? For downtown?
So the
Colonial Theater.
TIF right now is funding the Colonial Theater. It's part of the debt service. So that's new this year that I pointed out to you. So if you go to page 59.
Yeah.
And 3/4 of the way down, you'll see downtown TIF bonds. So you could see right now that the Colonial is spending 99,000, call it $100,000 towards the 2015 capital improvements, which was the Main Street Bridge when we did the bump outs and we did the nicer fencing and we did the ornamental streetlights down there. So the general fund paid for the nuts and bolts of repairing the bridge, and the TIF paid for the nice to haves. So there's 100,000 a year that goes towards that debt service. And then right below that, you'll see 210,000 out of the TIF account is going towards part of the Colonial debt service. So $310,000 a year is coming out of that million. And if you go to page 177 of your budget book, the very last page, you will see that we have 238,000 anticipated to flow into the downtown TIF this year. So we're slowly bleeding the million. We would expect over the next couple of years to get that to the break-even point and then be replenishing. But that's what the downtown TIF is doing, and they're spending over $300,000 a year in debt service for downtown-related projects.
But I see this other stuff that, excuse me, that Bob brings up, Mr. Mayor brings up, we all bring up. Okay, I want to see. We got a beautiful area. That's why I talked about the Halloween. It was awesome and viewed everything. It's exploit it. If I'm going to take another $50,000 out of the TIF fund, okay, for this year or for next year, you got all these other new businesses that are opening up. Doesn't that add to it?
It will, but
Over time.
there's a catch up to that. So some of these renovations will come in. So the residential project that Rusty's doing will come in once that's completed. And again, that ties to your assessing year. So we only captured its value as of April 1st this year, not a completed. So yes, it will. Only 50% of that money flows into the TIF and the other 50% flows into the general fund. So there are, but I'm just,
I
we
know,
can do
I-
anything. I'm just sharing with you right now, the TIF is going to be bleeding about 100,000 a year for good reasons. I mean, for well-needed projects.
Right. I mean, if the PIMCO building was sold, isn't the PIMCO building? The guy wants
Just
to
because a
make his
building
own-
is sold doesn't mean it becomes more valuable in assessment until somebody maybe makes some improvements to that, and that may
I
take
think
a
that's
couple
his
of years.
plan.
Hope so.
Can't spend plan money.
Exactly.
So the TIFs are work. I mean, and I'm getting off track here, but the downtown Weirs did the same thing, and this general fund fronted the Weirs TIF the money because we knew that TIF district was brand new and it was growing. But this year, we're anticipating that $170,000 is going to be going into the Weirs TIF, and the Weir's debt service is only 108,000. So in a and if they used every dollar,
Mhm.
they're going to cover their debt service, and they're going to start to pay back the negative balance that's at around 120,000 is the negative balance in the Weir's TIF. They'll start to pay back, which is right on track with what we projected. That it was probably going to be about a 5-year to break even and probably 7 years to pay it back.
Mhm.
And we're on track with that. So, I mean, there's something where the Weir's TIF grew from nothing to 180,000 or 170,000 in, a matter of 6 years. The Lakeport TIF is going to start generating now because for as long as it's been in place, there were no improvements happening in the TIF district for Lakeport. And now you've got, Lakeport Landing, you've got the Elm Street projects, you've got the Opera House, and you've got more happening there. So that's going to start to build up some money to start adding some opportunity in Lakeport as well.
So Counselor Susie, I agree with you. It does seem like small dollars compared to what's in the accounts, but my tendency is to look at these and say that they've been well managed over the years and performing the way they should. So I tend to defer on Scott on this, and just that's my position. That's all. And just it does seem like, again, it seems like small dollars, but I trust Scott's management of it, and certainly what's coming from.
I just wanted a better explanation. of
Sure.
how it was going.
No problem. So unless anyone has anything else this evening.